I'm Sarah, and I'm 29 years old. For most of my life, I believed my parents loved me and my sister Emma equally. I thought the little differences in how they treated us were just normal family dynamics. Emma was the social butterfly, the one who lit up every room she entered. I was the quiet, studious one who preferred books to parties. We were different, but I never thought that meant I was worth less to them. But what happened when I tried to use my college fund for graduate school changed everything. It exposed a pattern of favoritism and manipulation that had been hiding in plain sight for years. And when I finally understood their game, I realized I had been playing by rules that were designed to keep me losing. If you've ever felt like the family scapegoat, like you're constantly proving your worth to people who should love you unconditionally, this story might feel familiar. And if you've ever wondered whether you're imagining the favoritism, whether you're being too sensitive about how differently you're treated, I want you to know that your feelings are valid. The first sign should have been how they handled our 18th birthdays. Emma's party was a 3-day celebration with a rented venue, a DJ, and over 100 guests. They spent months planning it, and my mom took time off work to coordinate everything. When my 18th birthday came around 6 months later, they threw me a small dinner at home with immediate family. When I asked why the celebration was so different, my mom said Emma was more social and needed a bigger party to accommodate all her friends. It seemed reasonable at the time, but looking back, I realize it was the beginning of a pattern. Throughout high school, Emma struggled academically while I maintained a 4.0 GPA and was involved in debate team, student government, and volunteer work at the local animal shelter. But whenever report cards came out, the focus was always on Emma's improvement, even if she had barely passed her classes. My achievements were acknowledged with a quick nod and a comment about how I was naturally smart, so good grades were expected from me. Emma's C+ in chemistry was celebrated like a Nobel Prize. When college application time came around, my parents were very clear about the financial arrangements. They had set up education funds for both of us when we were born, and they explained that the money would cover tuition, room and board, and reasonable living expenses for our undergraduate degrees. Emma chose a local state school where she could live at home, while I was accepted to a prestigious university 3 states away with a partial scholarship. During my freshman year, I noticed that Emma seemed to have a lot more spending money than most college students. She was constantly buying new clothes, going on weekend trips with friends, and eating out at expensive restaurants. When I asked my parents about it, they said Emma was working part-time and had gotten good at budgeting. I was working 2 part-time jobs myself just to cover my personal expenses, so I admired what I thought was her financial responsibility. Emma dropped out of college after her sophomore year. She said she wanted to pursue her passion for event planning and didn't need a degree for that. My parents were disappointed but supportive, encouraging her to follow her dreams. They helped her get an internship at a wedding planning company through a family friend. Meanwhile, I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in environmental science. I had been accepted to a competitive graduate program that would lead to a career in environmental law. The program required 2 years of full-time study, and I had been counting on using the remainder of my college fund to cover tuition and living expenses. That's when my parents dropped the bomb. They told me the college fund was depleted, not just low, but completely empty. They explained that rising tuition costs had eaten up more than they expected, and there was nothing left for graduate school. I was devastated but tried to understand. College costs had indeed increased dramatically, and maybe they had underestimated how much my education would cost. I started researching student loans and looking for scholarships, determined to make my graduate school dreams work somehow. 2 months later, Emma announced her engagement to her boyfriend of 18 months. She was 21 years old and had been working as an unpaid intern at the wedding planning company. Her fiancé was a nice guy, but he was also 22 and working an entry-level job at a marketing firm. Neither of them had any savings. My parents were over the moon. They immediately started talking about planning the wedding of Emma's dreams. They wanted to give her the fairy tale wedding she had always wanted, they said. They began looking at venues, caterers, and photographers that were way beyond what a young couple could afford. When Emma showed me the venue she had chosen, I was shocked. It was a historic mansion that charged $15,000 just for the rental fee. The total wedding budget they were discussing was approaching $60,000. I asked Emma how she and her fiancé were planning to pay for such an expensive wedding. She looked at me with confusion and said that Mom and Dad were paying for it. They had told her not to worry about money, that they wanted to give her the perfect wedding as their gift to her and her future husband. The pieces started falling into place. Emma's spending money during college hadn't come from a part-time job or budgeting skills. It had come from her college fund, which my parents had been letting her use for living expenses even though she was living at home. When she dropped out of college, they had apparently decided to repurpose the remaining money for her wedding. I confronted my parents that evening. I asked them directly if Emma's college fund had been used for her wedding. They tried to deflect at first, saying that Emma's education path was different and the money was still being used for her future. When I pressed them, they admitted that yes, a portion of Emma's education fund was being used for the wedding, but they justified it by saying that Emma deserved to have a beautiful start to her married life. I pointed out that this meant Emma's college fund was being used for a party while mine had been depleted paying for actual education. They became defensive, saying that I was being selfish and that Emma's happiness was important too. They reminded me that I had gotten a good education and should be grateful for what they had provided. But I wasn't finished asking questions. I demanded to see the financial records for both education funds. My parents were reluctant, but I threatened to contact the bank directly since my name was on the account. Finally, they produced the statements. The truth was worse than I had imagined. Emma's college fund had barely been touched during her 2 years of college because she had been living at home and attending a much cheaper school. My fund had been depleted not just by my legitimate education expenses, but by numerous withdrawals labeled as support for Emma's living expenses, her car, her insurance, and various other costs. They had been subsidizing Emma's lifestyle throughout college by taking money from my fund. When she dropped out and decided to get married, they had decided to give her the remainder of both funds as a wedding gift. They had spent my money on her wedding without even telling me. I was speechless. Not only had they used my college fund for Emma's wedding, but they had been systematically transferring money from my account to hers for years. The reason I had struggled financially during college, working 2 jobs and living on ramen noodles, was because they had been giving my money to Emma. When I asked why they had done this, their explanation was that Emma needed more support because she wasn't as academically inclined as I was. They said they had always known I would be fine because I was smart and capable, but Emma needed more help to succeed. They genuinely seemed to believe that this was fair and reasonable. The conversation escalated quickly. I pointed out that they had essentially stolen my money and lied to me about it. They accused me of being dramatic and selfish, of trying to ruin Emma's happiness out of jealousy. They said I was acting entitled and that they had given me a good education, which was more than many parents could provide. I realized that in their minds, I was the strong one who didn't need help, while Emma was the delicate one who needed constant support and protection. They had created a dynamic where my needs were minimized and Emma's were prioritized, and they had convinced themselves that this was fair because I was more capable of handling disappointment and hardship. The wedding planning continued around me as if nothing had happened. Emma's excitement was palpable as she showed me dress options and venue decorations. She seemed genuinely oblivious to the financial reality of how her wedding was being funded. When I tried to explain to her what had happened, she became defensive and said I was trying to ruin her special day. My parents' attitude toward me shifted after our confrontation. They became cold and distant, treating me like I had committed some terrible transgression by questioning their financial decisions. They stopped calling me regularly and didn't include me in wedding planning discussions, even though I was supposed to be the maid of honor. The isolation was devastating. I was mourning the loss of my graduate school dreams while watching my family plan an elaborate celebration funded by my stolen money. I felt like I was going crazy, questioning whether I was really being unreasonable or if my anger was justified. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Martinez, who helped me understand the family dynamics I had been living with. She explained that I had been cast in the role of the responsible, capable child who didn't need support, while Emma was the precious, fragile child who needed constant care and protection. This dynamic had allowed my parents to justify treating us completely differently while maintaining the illusion that they loved us equally. Dr. Martinez helped me see that this pattern had been present throughout our childhood in ways I had normalized. Emma's bigger birthday parties, her freedom to quit activities when they became challenging, her constant financial support, and the way our parents always made excuses for her behavior while holding me to impossibly high standards. The therapy gave me clarity, but it also gave me determination. I decided that I wasn't going to let my parents' betrayal destroy my future. I threw myself into researching every possible source of funding for graduate school. I applied for scholarships, grants, and fellowships with an intensity I had never shown before. 3 months before Emma's wedding, I received news that changed everything. I had been awarded a full fellowship to an even more prestigious graduate program than the one I had originally planned to attend. The fellowship covered tuition, living expenses, and even provided a stipend for research activities. It was a more competitive program at a better school, and I had earned it entirely on my own merit. I was ecstatic, but I also felt a strange sense of vindication. I had achieved something remarkable without any help from my family. In fact, I had succeeded despite their sabotage of my financial resources. When I told my parents about the fellowship, their reaction was telling. Instead of being proud and excited for me, they seemed almost disappointed. They made comments about how I was lucky to get it and how I should be grateful for the opportunity. There was no acknowledgement of the hard work I had put in or the obstacles I had overcome. Emma's reaction was even more revealing. She seemed genuinely upset that I had found a way to attend graduate school without needing family money. She made comments about how I always found a way to make everything about me, even during her engagement period. The wedding was a lavish affair. Emma looked beautiful in her $3,000 dress, and the venue was decorated with thousands of dollars worth of flowers and lighting. The open bar served top-shelf liquor, and the 5-course dinner was prepared by a renowned catering company. I stood at the altar as the maid of honor, watching my parents beam with pride as they presented their daughter with the perfect wedding. The officiant mentioned how the bride's parents had spared no expense to give her the wedding of her dreams. I looked out at the guests, many of whom knew me and knew about my academic achievements, and I wondered if any of them realized that they were celebrating an event funded by my stolen college money. During the reception, several family friends congratulated me on my fellowship and upcoming graduate program. Word had spread through our extended family about my achievement, and many relatives expressed how proud they were of me. My parents' friends seemed impressed by my accomplishments and asked about my research interests and career goals. But my parents remained focused entirely on Emma and her new husband. They gave elaborate toasts about Emma's happiness and how beautiful she looked. They mentioned how proud they were to have raised such a loving daughter and how excited they were to welcome their new son-in-law to the family. There was no mention of my upcoming graduate program or my fellowship. It was as if my achievement didn't exist or wasn't worth acknowledging at their other daughter's wedding. The moment that crystallized everything happened during the father-daughter dance. My dad was spinning Emma around the dance floor, and she was laughing and smiling radiantly. The DJ made an announcement about how Emma's parents had made her dream wedding possible through their love and generosity. I looked around at the elaborate decorations, the expensive venue, the designer dress, and the gourmet food, and I realized that every single element of this celebration had been purchased with money that was supposed to fund my education. My parents had literally stolen my future to buy Emma's perfect day. But I also realized something else. I had built my own future despite their betrayal. I had earned my way into a better program than I had originally planned to attend. I had proven that I didn't need their money or their support to succeed. I was going to be fine, not because they had raised me to be strong, but because I had learned to be strong in spite of them. After the wedding, I made a decision that I had been building toward for months. I went to graduate school and threw myself into my studies with complete dedication. I excelled in my program, published research papers, and built relationships with professors who became mentors and advocates. I also maintained minimal contact with my family. I called my parents on holidays and birthdays, but I stopped sharing details about my life and achievements. I realized that they had never really been interested in my success anyway, so there was no point in seeking their approval or validation. Emma's marriage started having problems within the first year. Her husband struggled with the financial pressure of maintaining the lifestyle her parents had funded during their engagement. Emma had never learned to budget or live within her means, and she expected her married life to continue at the same level of luxury as her wedding. When Emma's marriage started falling apart, my parents began reaching out to me more frequently. They wanted to know about my life, my program, and my future career prospects. They started making comments about how proud they were of me and how they always knew I would succeed. I recognized this pattern from Dr. Martinez's explanations. Now that Emma was struggling and I was succeeding, they wanted to shift their attention to me. They wanted to bask in my achievements and claim credit for my success. but I had learned to set boundaries. When they asked about my life, I gave brief, polite responses. When they tried to take credit for my success, I corrected them politely but firmly. When they hinted that they expected me to provide financial support for Emma's marital problems, I made it clear that I would not be doing that. The most difficult conversation came when my mom called me crying about Emma's potential divorce. She said that Emma was devastated and needed family support. She asked if I could help Emma financially since I would be earning a good salary after graduation. I told my mom that I understood Emma was going through a difficult time, but that I would not be providing financial support. I reminded her that my parents had made it very clear that Emma was their priority when they used my college fund for her wedding. I explained that since they had chosen to invest in Emma's happiness rather than my education, they should continue to be responsible for supporting her. My mom became upset and accused me of being cold and unforgiving. She said that family should help family and that I was being selfish and vindictive. She reminded me that I was successful now and should be grateful for how they had raised me. I ended the conversation by telling her that I was indeed grateful for my success, but that I had achieved it despite their actions, not because of them. I explained that I had learned the hard way that I could only count on myself and that I was not going to enable the same patterns of behavior that had hurt me. My relationship with my parents never fully recovered. They continued to treat me with a mixture of pride and resentment, proud of my achievements but resentful that I refused to let them take credit or use my success to solve Emma's problems. Emma's marriage did end in divorce, and she moved back in with my parents. She struggled to find stable employment and often asked me for money or career advice. I provided emotional support when she genuinely needed it, but I maintained firm boundaries around financial assistance. I graduated from my program with honors and was offered a position at a prestigious environmental law firm. My starting salary was more than my parents had ever earned, and I was able to pay off my undergraduate student loans within 2 years. The vindication came in an unexpected way. 3 years after graduation, I was featured in a national magazine article about young environmental lawyers making a difference. The article mentioned my academic achievements, my fellowship, and the groundbreaking research I had conducted during graduate school. My parents saw the article and called me immediately. They were suddenly full of pride and excitement about my success. They wanted to share the article with all their friends and family. They talked about how they had always known I would achieve great things and how proud they were to be my parents. But their pride felt hollow and self-serving. They wanted to claim credit for my success without acknowledging the ways they had undermined me. They wanted to celebrate my achievements without recognizing the cost of their favoritism. I realized that their love and pride had always been conditional on my ability to make them look good. When I was struggling and needed support, they had been more interested in funding Emma's happiness. Now that I was successful and newsworthy, they wanted to bask in my reflected glory. During that phone call, I made a decision that felt like the final step in my healing process. I told my parents that I appreciated their pride in my success, but that I needed them to understand something important. I explained that my achievements were not a reflection of their parenting, but a testament to my own resilience and determination. I told them that their decision to use my college fund for Emma's wedding had taught me that I could only count on myself. I said that while their betrayal had been painful, it had also forced me to develop strength and independence that I might not have found otherwise. I didn't say this to hurt them, but to establish the truth about our relationship. I needed them to understand that my success was not vindication of their parenting choices, but evidence of my ability to overcome their mistakes. My parents were shocked by my directness. They had never heard me speak so clearly about their favoritism or acknowledge the impact of their actions. They tried to defend themselves, saying they had done their best and that they loved both Emma and me equally. But I had learned from Dr. Martinez that love is not just a feeling, but a set of actions and choices. My parents' actions had consistently favored Emma over me, and their choices had prioritized her happiness over my opportunities. Their love might have been equal in their hearts, but it had never been equal in their behavior. Today, I maintain a cordial but distant relationship with my parents. I see them during holidays and family gatherings, but I don't seek their approval or validation. I have built my own life and my own support system, and I don't need them to acknowledge my worth for me to know that I have value. Emma and I have a better relationship now than we did during the wedding period. She has started to understand the ways our parents' favoritism hurt both of us, though she still struggles with the financial and emotional dependence they created. She has apologized for her reaction when I tried to explain how her wedding was funded, and she has started working on building her own independence. The most important thing I learned from this experience is that family dysfunction often hides behind the guise of love and protection. My parents genuinely believed they were doing what was best for both of us, but their actions created a dynamic where one daughter was constantly supported while the other was constantly expected to be strong and independent. I also learned that vindication doesn't always come from other people acknowledging their mistakes. Sometimes vindication comes from proving to yourself that you can succeed despite the obstacles others place in your path. Sometimes it comes from building a life that reflects your own values, rather than trying to earn approval from people who have already shown you their priorities. If you're in a similar situation, if you're the family member who is expected to be strong while others are coddled and protected, I want you to know that your feelings are valid. The differential treatment you're experiencing is real, and it's not your fault. You are not being too sensitive or too demanding when you expect to be treated fairly. You also don't have to accept unfair treatment just because it comes from family. You can love your family while also protecting yourself from their dysfunction. You can set boundaries that preserve your own well-being while still maintaining relationships with people who matter to you. Most importantly, you don't need anyone else's validation to know your worth. You don't need your parents to acknowledge their mistakes for you to heal from them. You don't need your siblings to admit their privilege for you to build your own success. Your worth is not determined by how fairly your family treats you. Your potential is not limited by the resources they choose to give you. Your future is not dependent on their support or approval. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you experienced favoritism in your family? Have you had to build your own success despite being overlooked or undervalued? How did you learn to set boundaries with family members who didn't appreciate your worth? Your story matters, and your strength matters. If this video resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building your own success, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Remember, you are worthy of love, support, and fair treatment. You deserve to be celebrated for your achievements, not just expected to be strong. And you have the power to build a life that reflects your own values, regardless of the family dynamics you were born into. Thank you for listening to my story and for sharing this journey with me. You are not alone, and you are stronger than you know.